Rich Miner, Google Ventures. I'm just going to introduce David because I've known him for, I think, pretty close to 20 years or so. And excited to have him here talking about his book and other projects. He's been a sort of innovator, entrepreneur in the Boston area for, well, since the early 90s, and has a multitude of degrees, including, I think most recently, he was sort of both at MIT's Media Lab and also at Harvard in the EdTech group there, and got a master's. But he'll give you more of his background. From my perspective, I think I first started, seeing David around, or taking real notice around the time of ambient. Welcome, come on in. For me, he really caught my eye when he was doing the work at Ambient Devices, which was, I don't know, his second or third startup out of 5 or 6, but his ability to combine beautiful objects and information in the most unbelievably simplest terms, absolutely caught my imagination and started to make you realize just how you can cook down incredible amounts of information into common everyday objects that are around you. And I'm interested in hearing what he has to tell us today about his explorations and path and that and other things that he's been doing. And so with that, I will give you David Rose.
Thank you, Rich. Thanks for having me this morning. I brought you all posters. There aren't enough books to give out to everybody, but they're available on Amazon or ask your manager. They'll pay for them. I've heard. But Rick Borovoy just reminded me that one of his objects, the NTAG conference badge, which you wear and it talks to other conference badges and seeds the conversation with interesting things to say, is one of the things on the periodic table of Enchanted Objects. So have one of these, and the meat of the talk is sort of covers some of what these are, and so this is good reference for later too. But they're more at the back of the room. And for people that are like back in the lodge living room, could I ask you guys to come up? It's more fun to have you be part of the mix. So today I'm going to try to convince you that these black slabs, which are doing so well for Google, may not be the future of how we interact with the internet in 5 or 10 years. And to tee up the conversation, I wanted to show you a recent piece that came out in the New York Times last week, or I guess it was the week before now, that features my cute son. So here's. Enchanted objects are ordinary things that have the same functionality that they had before, except now they can talk. They're connected. These are ordinary things that have extraordinary capabilities.
When we're creating technology for the home, really we want to make something that's seamless and transparent, and that as opposed to having things sort of call out and draw your attention to it, make it a more ambient experience.
We'll just continue to behave with those everyday objects as we do in the world, and we can remain focused on connectivity between two people.
What we're seeing now is this proliferation of different devices that are, moving out from the cell phone and onto our bodies and into the world.
So in the middle of our living room is a coffee table that has Google Earth embedded in the coffee table. And I just found that having access to this amazing zoomable map completely changes how often we talk about travel and how often we talk about the world and how often we look up places that are mentioned. And it's nice to have this beautiful large reference object sitting in the middle of our living space. Our devices can be a lot simpler, and the interaction to them can be a lot simpler. The internet-connected umbrella can just be an umbrella that only shows whether it's going to rain. You don't need to tap on an icon or do anything that seems sort of artificial.
We come from a time in which we need to adapt to our homes and not the other way around. So what if our home could be a platform that we personalize and we customize? The key is, how do we create this ecosystem, these technologies that allow us to move from one experience to the other in the most seamless, most magical way.
Some people might think that a connected home is overwhelming, that there'll be so much information in the connected home that it's just a cacophonous environment and you wouldn't want to live there. But I think about how we decorate our homes today. We put photographs everywhere, we put paintings up, we put Post-it notes up. You know, there's a lot of decoration and adornment in the home. And I think if enchanted objects can be designed in the right way, we're going to want hundreds of them around us.
I think what we're going to see is a new renaissance where designers as well as computer scientists are going to really make a really big impact in the type of technology that we see in the home.
The history of computers has mostly been about efficiency. I think one of the things that's changing is that enchanted objects can be about adding motion and add magic to the fabric of our everyday lives and experiences. Isn't he cute? What's that? Oh, one is called a road. What is it? It's an identification band that shows your blood type and that sort of thing. Road ID, that's what it's called, Road ID. So this can be interactive. You can ask me questions. I'm used to teaching, so like if you're controlling the room, I will intimidate you. The first Enchanted Objects project that I worked on was this project out of the Media Lab, probably in 1994. And I had a company that called Interactive Factory at the time, and we worked on the DVD part of the Lego robotics Mindstorms. The project was to take computation and sensors and put it in Lego bricks. And I thought even then, boy, like if you can reduce the size, this was the size of the brain of the thing, but now it could probably be done in about this size. But I just thought, wow, if you look at the trends in computation and in sensors, and you can do it at the cost of embedding it in plastic like this, it's going to change toys, but it's also going to change everything in our interaction with everything. So just so you don't have to read the book, here's the 4 parts. The first part of the book is about, I try to draw a distinction between 4 very different futures and try to draw sort of the brightest line possible between what I call the terminal world, which is sort of what people assume will be the future. This was a Microsoft Vision video you may have seen. What's interesting to me about the vision that Microsoft brings, and to some extent, Google has made other investments, but the assumption is that there will be more screens and they will have more gesture, but that our interaction with them will be sort of the same as what we have today. It will be a call and response interaction. They will be waiting for us to do something to them, and that requires a lot of our attention and demands, these are very seductive objects that we can fiddle with all day long and be blue-faced as we walk down the road. And in some ways, that's sort of the problem with these is how much attention they demand. And to me, there are market incentives that keep this terminal world in place, because there's a wonderful advertising mechanism that loves pixels. And so the more we can sort of project and cover the world and our kitchens and everything with pixels, the sort of more of a built-in advertising model that is. Now, the second future that I talk about is to really, instead of locating technology in these convergence devices, is to locate technology on and in ourselves. And this is the fantasy of superpowers. The difference between Superman and Iron Man is that anybody can wear one of these suits, right? You don't have to be born with superpowers. You can inherit them by putting on the suit. And I think this is obviously transformational if you're an amputee or getting a cochlear implant. It does seem to be problematic as we put these things on our faces. And how many people have read The Bubble Filter? It's a book about how the more that we have personalization technology and the more that we have collaborative filtering technology, the more we'll all have our own privatized view of media. And so there will be no consensual news. There will be no consensual view of what we see in the world. And that's sort of what I feel like is the biggest problem with wearables like glass is what happened with audio in the 80s, where we're all sort of jamming on our own Walkman, and you couldn't really talk to anybody on the bus because they were all in their own audio space. Now, if everybody's in their own visual space, it will limit sociability in some ways. So I talk about that problem. Now, another very distinct place that you might locate technology is not in and on yourself, but outsourced. So the outsourced model is the social robot model. And this has been the fantasy forever of human-computer interaction, right? Like, wouldn't it be awesome if they just spoke our language and gestured our gestures? And if God made us in his image or her image, shouldn't we be making tech in our image? Like, this is, of course, right? Now, I think of this as sort of the Downton fantasy, which is like you have your people, like you've got somebody for everybody. You got the person who cooks for you, who dresses you, who teaches you, like all embedded in different agents, if you will. And the more that these agents can look like us and reflect our emotional states and have their own emotional state, like that will accelerate how much we bond with them. So this will be much more powerful than iPads because they'll have eyes, right? And they'll be maybe beautiful, and maybe they'll have what the psychologists call neoteny, which is the childlike characteristics of cats and dogs and Japanese anime are really attractive to us, and we like immediately glom onto these big eyes and big head proportions, and they will accelerate how much we bond with them. One of our colleagues at the Media Lab has created this dieting robot that sits next to your fridge in your kitchen and has you enter what you eat. And it would be an iPad, except it's sitting inside the Teletubby belly of Autumn, which has these like beautiful, big, giant blue eyes. And so you feel like bonded with this thing, and you feel more guilty the more Haagen-Dazs you have after 11. And just last week, Cynthia's group announced
this is your
this.
house. This is your car. This is your toothbrush. These are your things. But these are the things that matter. And somewhere in between is this guy. Introducing Jibo, the world's first family robot. Say hi, Jibo.
Hi, Jibo.
How many people have seen this? Ready? 2.
Jibo helps everyone out throughout their day. He's the world's best cameraman. By intelligently tracking the action around him, he can independently take video and photos, so that you can put down your camera and be a part of the scene.
Jibo, take the picture.
He's a hands-free helper. You can talk to him, and he'll talk to you back, so you don't have to skip a beat.
Excuse me, Anne?
Yes, Jibo.
Melissa just sent a reminder that she's picking you up in half an hour to go grocery shopping.
Thanks, Jibo.
He's an entertainer and educator. Through interactive applications, Jibo can teach.
Let me in, or else I'll... And I'll... And I'll blow your house in.
So I guess I would argue that like he's cute, right? Like he's getting there, right? And he is sort of a convergence device, right? Like he reads to you, he talks to your mail, he orders pizza, like he does everything, which sort of is on the same path as her, which leads us right into the uncanny valley of the more things have the more we come closer to human-like characteristics, the more we're creeped out by the technology we just made, and it becomes this golem or something else that we don't want to spend time around because it threatens our own humanity. It threatens our own humanness the better we are at making these things. So which takes us into Blade Runner and lots of other fictions that have sort of foretold of that uncanny valley problem. So in the book, I argue a fourth future, which is neither convergence nor on us nor personalitied, is Enchanted Objects. And these are things like, I don't know, my exemplar from the cover of the book is the ambient umbrella, which was inspired by Frodo. Who knows what Frodo did? Todd? Who knows what Frodo's sword, what the capability was? Adam? No, this one. Orcs, right? Orcs, right? So it was Sting was a sword that was both sharp and sort of the perfect size for Frodo, but it also anticipated its own use, right? It like knew when orcs were nearby and would sort of warn you of that. So it had like a personal affordance. It was a feed-forward affordance, right? It was sort of, and like tooltips, like you'd roll over, like it anticipates its use. So the ambient umbrella does that with rain. So the little LEDs sprinkle because it has a pager chip in the handle that gets data from AccuWeather and signals when you're on your way out the door. So this is a dialectic that between a fictional story and a real invention. And I'm really interested in these dialectics because it really answers the question of how are we inspired to make what we make? And the book goes through a series of examples of these stories that run in all of our bloodstreams about these different objects or these different play patterns. So, I mean, one of those from Grimm is to look at the surface of a mirror and say, well, it's already a narcissistic surface, but you could make it even more narcissistic if it has more capabilities, like this project. So this shows her recent self, the last thing she tried on, so she can do sort of a compare and contrast at Nordstrom's or it also can slow down the video so you can see her ass as you spin. So another enchanted object, which is both a normal thing that works as a thing, but then has this imbued extra intelligence, is this Anoto pen. Have anybody tried an Anoto yet? So it's a pen, and it writes on anything, just has ink. But it also has a microphone inside, and it will record the lecture. And then if you write on special paper, it has a camera that looks at the dot pattern of the special paper, so it will record every gesture. And the sort of magical thing is it associates the lecture with the gesture. So if you want to get back to the point in the lecture where it was interesting or confusing, you just tap your notes there, and it starts playing the audio right there, which is sort of cool, right? But then it's also a pen, right? Like it doesn't have to be this bizarre other thing. It can sort of start and end with being itself. Or these trash cans, which you all know are around Cambridge, which are both trash cans physically, but then also they compact the trash, and then they only tell the trash truck to come when they're full, which reduces a lot of high-cost labor waste. So the poster you have in your hand goes through these 6 aspirations that we've had that are revealed through fairy tales and stories and pop culture that we've had forever, and sort of tries to line up both things we might imagine and also real things that have been built in the Internet of Things, sort of according to this structure. Any questions so far? Yeah.
One interesting thing working on mobile devices is someone recently published a picture internally that said, I took the Android interface and I took away all the anachronisms. And what he did is he took the wall clock and replaced it with a picture of a phone. He took the book and replaced it with a picture of a phone. He took the headphones and replaced it with another picture of a phone. All these objects that were designed for a particular sensory motor way of getting information were replaced because now we don't use that thing, we use our phone for that. And so the set of idioms that you can refer to guide people's expectations of what's going to happen are actually shrinking. We had this problem, we launched a newsstand product, and there was supposed to be a stylized picture of a rolled up newspaper. But a lot of people don't know what a rolled up newspaper is, because that's a way of getting information that's just not useful anymore. Right. How do we add idioms back so that there's a space of expectations rather than just subtracting all the time?
Right, like after skeuomorphism goes away and you don't have any of these reference icons. Yeah. Right. Well, in some ways, I'm railing against the putting everything into your phone and sort of arguing that if you spread information and services sort of thinly throughout your environment, that'll be a more naturalistic interface.
Do you think that there is a way to actually still create richness, though, and say, and a learning thing? There's actually something still to teach your kids. It's not just that they come with all their expectations. What does that light on your umbrella mean? Might still be a question that needs an answer.
Not really. I mean, the light on the umbrella is sort of like what I like about that example is you don't really have to ask the question of like, well, which app are you in right now and which mode are you in? It's modeless, and so it just does its thing, and it does it in the perfect decisional moment of when you're passing it, and so like, why tell you about the weather on the news or any other time? Like, don't put the weather in the mirror, because what are you going to do about it when you're dressing? Put it right in the moment where you need the information.
Dave, is there enough information though in that umbrella cap? It's very simple, right? But
Right.
what if it's going to be high wind hurricane versus
Yes.
drizzle?
Right.
One would call for the umbrella, the other one wouldn't.
Right. Well, I do think you can think about sort of the design of information as this pyramid where at the very highest level, you have to answer the question of, is it worth my attention? Like, even as a manager, you're sort of like, what's worth my attention now? And then once you answer that question, then you can get more details about well, why is it worth my attention, and how should, tell me more. But I think what's mostly missing from interfaces is just answering that very high level, most summarized question of where should I be allocating my attention? Because I just think about, remember voicemail systems when you had to like go check and see if you had any voicemail, and it took time to even just answer that question, much less the question of, are any of them critical right now? So that's let me offer some more examples, and I'm happy, these are both really good questions, and I don't want to short shrift them, but inspired by Dorothy and The Wizard of Oz and the crystal balls, and sort of the ability for crystal balls through fiction to show not only information quickly, but also to foretell the future. In 2001, I invented this ambient orb device, which would show anything you cared to track. So it really didn't have the same affordances of the umbrella, right? You didn't know what it was tracking. It might be tracking weather, it might be tracking pollen count. You go to a website and set it. You might be tracking whether it's too windy or too calm to sail your boat, wherever your boat is, or the first derivative of barometric pressure, or how your garden's not growing, but all of those were information that could be packed into one pixel, because you could sort of one-dimensionalize the information and be able to really see it out of the corner of your eye. And the magic of that device was just how little attention it required, right? It didn't ever feel like you were overwhelmed with information around the house. And the company today, Ambient Devices, is doing this product, which is the Energy Joule, which is being sold into power companies to try to help people understand how much energy they're consuming in the house and what the price of energy is. And as the price of energy changes in more dynamic energy priced markets, that helps reduce brownouts and reduce new plant construction and spinning up dirty diesel plants and all kinds of other goodness. And then this has two levels of reading, sort of back to your question, Keith, which is it both shows you at a glance sort of what the status is, and then you pick it up and it shows you like the details of how many cents you're paying for mid-peak power right now, and how much so it sort of is a drill down device in itself. Although I think it would be more elegant to just make it like an NFC or Bluetooth LE sort of thing, so you just tap your phone on it and then it gives you the drill out information on your phone, rather than having to have a screen on it. So for telepathy, one of my favorite examples is this issue of sort of understanding where your family is and their state, or the state of your team, like who's where and who's working on what. Like, people have made maps that allow you to track the status of your family on a map, which always feels like completely intrusive. And even if you're not having an affair and you love them, and even then, you really don't want to be tracked on a map. So the Weasley clock is sort of cool because it just shows you the status of people. It doesn't show you exactly where mortal peril. It just shows you that they are in mortal peril. When I was a kid, my parents would play this LP of Peter and the Wolf, where every character in the story has a different ringtone. And it was sort of a neat idea that I took to sort of generalize this idea of a doorbell. So our location-based system that we have in our house is, as each family member sort of is on their way home at the end of the day, the doorbell plays a ringtone for her when she's about 10 miles out, 1 mile out, or very close to home, which just gives you like this sort of breeze of presence. It's audio only, and it's sort of it's nice to know. It's reassuring and calming and keeps me from texting when I'm on my bike. Objects for safekeeping is the next category. This project I especially like at the Media Lab because it embedded the sense of how close you are to blowing through your monthly budget. which is, I suppose, a way of being somebody taking care of you, by changing the spring tension on a hinge in your wallet. So as you get closer to blowing through your monthly budget, your wallet's like it's harder and harder to open it, which is great, right? Because there's no screen in sight. It's a gesture you do 10 times a day, and it's almost subconscious. It can communicate this information to you in a way that's almost like below the conscious threshold. There are other objects that are obviously for safety that are becoming connected, which I'm excited about because they allow you to rent out your house to other Airbnb strangers more easily without showing up. I want to talk a little bit about sort of the fantasy of immortality given to us by fountains of youth. There's a beautiful project by Hiroshi Ishii at the Media Lab called, I think maybe inspired by like rubbing a bottle and having a wizard come out, or having, who came out of the genie came out of the lamp, right? So there's these beautiful glass bottles, and when you open them, when you uncork them, you unstop them, the music emerges, or at least that instrument emerges. So it's a jazz trio, and you can sort of cork them. I don't know that you'd want one of these to play with all day, but it's a great demo, and it's really evocative of how you can bake information into an ordinary, everyday gesture. This inspired my most recent company, which is called Ambient Vitality, which did an internet-connected pill bottle cap. So we sort of assumed we weren't going to change pharmacy workflow, and we just used the amber pill vial that 3.5 billion scripts are distributed in these things in the US every year. And then we just implemented a little sensor, LED, and speaker into the cap. And I think the key to the success of this product was actually its subtlety. So in the big, it lived most of its life in the sort of barely nudging you land of ambientness, right? So it would, rather than like beeping like your microwave beeps, which is totally annoying, I would sort of love to have all beeping eliminated from my life. It would start out by just pulsing with light really subtly, and there was an ambient sort of puck on the wall that also pulses with light. It's almost like the perfect butler, who's like, and you're like, and then you realize it's time for your next meeting, and you don't even credit whoever the other person is. But so there's a lot of design space down here in the sort of pre-conscious, like scent and subliminal sound effects like white noise or the change in temperature of something that happens even before you get through to ambient or apparent or obnoxious. But I think sort of designing objects that have that sort of smooth curve to them is good. So we did a trial with partners with Mass General Hospital, and the control group, this is days and this is people, and pink means they didn't take their med that day. So this is what normal pill-taking behavior looks like, and then we turned on all these subtle prompts, and this is what the intervention group looked like. So a huge change in pill-taking behavior, which is good for pharmaceutical companies because they sell a shitload more pills. It's good for insurers because people don't go to the hospital as much. It's good for people too because they don't reject livers. And AT&T loves this because there are a lot more pill caps sold than cars or other things you might put cell phones into. This was a national campaign that
is the network.
AT&T did.
A network of possibilities. In here, video games are not confined to screens. In here, medicine talks to you.
And dogs,
in here,
there are a lot of
pets
dogs.
never get lost.
So it's a good connectivity
it's
opportunity
the AT&T network,
for
and what's
connectivity
possible in
of
here
dogs.
is almost impossible to say.
And then we were parodied by Colbert, which is a high point. As you've probably noticed, there are many objects that are internet connected that attempt to track our sleep and mood and stress and food and activity. A couple of ones that you may not have seen. I'm an advisor to a little company that's doing this little button, should be half the size, but it's called the Sun Sprite, and it's for people that have seasonal affectiveness disorder. So it sort of makes sure that you get enough sun. And it's remarkable for only one reason. I mean, it's a little Bluetooth device and has a nice app and everything, but you'd expect that. But there are 2 solar panels on it, so you never have to charge it, which just seems like it solves a really important problem in all these like wearable gadgets, like the Jawbone Up. I'm always like, oh, is it charged? Is it not charged? Like, I end up feeling what?
Unless you don't get enough sun.
Right. If you don't get enough sun, then it dies, right? And then you're depressed too. But but I feel like these things need to harness parasitic power off of motion or off of sun in order to care for us rather than us always caring for them. This other project, also from Patty's group at the Media Lab, was a fork that tries to make you eat less quickly for people that sort of shovel it down. And it was commercialized through this other company called Happy Fork. And it's interesting. The feedback loop here is interesting because as you eat too quickly, it introduces a little bit of palsy, so you sort of don't hit your mouth as often, which is it's such a stupid idea. And like I can't believe anybody would want this, but I don't know. It's sort of.
Have they got the opposite? My mother-in-law has Parkinson's, and she would.
Oh right, it would like dampen. It would dampen her palsy. Yeah, that's a good idea. How many people have seen this, the Vessel cup? Do you know how they're doing like the mass spectrometry tech in the bottom of the cup? I really don't get that. But apparently it differentiates between Diet Coke and Diet Pepsi. Like it knows exactly what's in the cup and then can measure how much and how often you drink. So it really solves this very hard quantified self problem of what are you eating, right? Which is because no one's willing to log it on an app, consistently. And so, this is one approach. As long as you're willing to have your Chardonnay out of this cup, then it's okay. I did, yeah. Colbert has a really good one. So this fantasy of flying, of course, is in the 9th century, 1001 Nights, the fantasy of a magic carpet was imagined. We don't quite have flying cars yet, or self-driving cars, at least for purchase yet. How many of you guys have a self-driving car? Don't you get them here? No, that's not a perk. Should be a perk.
Work in snow first.
Right, that's true. This project called the Copenhagen Wheel makes your commute at least a little bit easier, maybe less sweaty if you're a biker, by baking in a battery and electric motor into the wheel so that as you pedal harder, it gives you more power. And I like the architecture of this, where you can take your old bike and just put a new wheel on. You don't have to buy a whole new bike. It's sort of like the parking meters in Brookline. They just took the tops off and put the credit card machine on the top of the old meters. I just thought that was great, that they didn't have to like redesign the whole meter, that it had sort of the right architecture. I'm going to fly through another one just quickly. So the last category is expression. This is maybe the most interesting. I talk in the book about Lego and about Guitar Hero. I really like this. I really like scaffold that supports creativity, and this magic paintbrush is one of those things. Nice, huh? So another form of expression is photography, and I've been a photographer and taking photos forever. How many people have tried a life logging camera? Anybody worn one? So this is a product by Narrative, a Swedish company, successful Kickstarter. I wore it for about 3 weeks until I put it in the laundry or lost it or whatever. But I'll show you the results. So it's about 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. It takes a photo automatically every 30 seconds, and has a GPS also, so it stamps where the photo is taken. And then you get this digital portrait of your day, like a little flip book of your day. And I'll show you one. This is a little bit revealing, but let's see. Oh, here are two. So I sped it up about 300 times. So you could see this is one at MIT. This is one in Copenhagen teaching a workshop. That's a magician that I was able to teach with. Sorry, I didn't mask out any faces, but I mean, obviously this isn't designed to be shared at a conference or a talk. It's designed to help you sort of see things about your day. And I think it does reveal things, like just as you scan through, like how many people did you interact with? Like how sociable were you today? How many times did you snack? How many times did you look at your phone while you're at the playground with your kids? How often did you get outside? Like it's sort of, if you could look at the metadata from all of these photos, it's a pretty revealing picture of how we live. So my most recent company is just about extracting metadata from photos, and I know Google sort of has an interest in this as well. But I just wanted to give you a quick demo. We're training our system on classifiers for patterns primarily because most of the money is in brands. So brands want to know sort of how are people using my products and where and with what other things. So let's see. So this is a real-time feed from Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram. I'm sorry, there might be porn. I don't control that. So we can select a category like faces or text extraction or retailers, or let's just do liquor. That's going to be fun. So we can find, sort of these are the in the wild shots of how people are portraying liquor brands through photos. So liquor brands obviously love this because they want to know what are the usage occasions for the product, who's using it, and then they can learn more about targeting, building audiences and targeting ads.
Where are the photos coming from?
They're coming from public sources, from the biggest public feeds. So we have a deal with, we're processing all of Tumblr photos, which is 120 million a day. Twitter, about a third of Twitter in the US and about 5% worldwide, and then Instagram. So it's this huge trove of photos and 300 servers that we're paying Amazon a lot of money for. But I mean, I just think it's interesting from an Internet of Things perspective because cameras are ending up being such a cheap way of sensing things, right? Like probably the next version of the Nest will have a camera in it, not just to do motion, but to figure out who's home, if people would tolerate it. So in the third part of the book, I talk, again, I sort of try to pick a fight with a phone and talk about like what are the sort of inherent abilities that spreading services and information thinly around us have as opposed to on convergence devices. So we talked about glanceability, gesture, things can be maybe more affordable, more wearable, more indestructible, like the Facebook coffee table, more usable because the interaction can be simpler and more lovable. I recently did a workshop in Copenhagen at the Copenhagen Interaction Design Institute, and this is one of the concept videos for interactive shades. So they know that you need masking, so they move by to respect your privacy. And then they open if you're not around because you'd like more light in the room. So you get the idea. So one of the projects that I thought would be especially interesting to you is there's just this question about if you have Internet of Things and sort of the programmable world, how might you control that? How might you program that? And I think AR is sort of one of these technologies that allows us to see what is programmable and interrogate and manipulate what is programmable. So this is a project where you saw a light switch and hear a speaker where you can look through with an augmented reality interface and pick the set of stations that you want to put on this nine switch dial. And then once you've done that, you've picked the 9 stations that you like, and you don't have to use AR ever again on your radio, but you now have programmed it so those 9 stations are the 9 stations that you want to toggle between. So it sort of answers this question of like, and this is drawing a relationship between one speaker and another speaker, and so you can, so you sort of get the idea. But I thought that would be an interesting. You know, it does require something else of the devices in our life, though, whether they're enchanted or not, which is they have to be legible to the computer, right? So the computer vision system, as an industrial designer, you're no longer designing beautiful objects for people, but you're designing things that have barcode-ness, so that they're differentiated for the robots to be able to see, right? Like the speaker had to have that unique pattern, so the system could say, oh, that's David's speaker in his house, and then it becomes addressable by the machine. So one last framework in the part 3 of the book is to think about how does something sort of go in a stepwise fashion between being inert, like a trash can, and being connected, and then personalized, and then sort of play a part in the social web, maybe gamified, and then have a story that engages you. And we, as I'll show you in the last video, we hacked a trash can and sort of made it the Amazon trash can. And as you throw things out in the Amazon trash can, there's a camera that recognizes what's thrown out and proposes it onto your Amazon Fresh list, because you might want more of that thing. But as soon as we built the prototype, we realized what an opportunity. Like as you throw something out, what an opportunity to not just have coconut water again shipped all the way from Asia, but to have the trash can propose like a more locally sourced thing, or give you shit about like third box of cookies this week. Like, are you sure? Are you sure you want to do that? So our fiction was like, it's Oscar who's living in the trash can, who's giving you, feedback or a hard time about what he might be reordering for you, or out of season strawberries. Why not try something else? So the last part of the book talks more about what happens when you have many of these things that can talk together and they can sort of all collude on your behalf. And I've been recently wearing the Jawbone Up. Have other people tried this one? It seems like the Brookline social network is all into Fitbit rather than Jawbone. But anyway, my up connects to if this then that, which allows me to write these one-sentence rules. How many people know IFT? Most people IFT. So I can set my lights to recently what I've done with the lighting in my house is it glows that sort of Virgin Airlines purple if I reach 10,000. So like my home looks cool if I've done the right thing. So, but it's nice because it's sort of it's a feedback device that's social that my family sees. But you can start to associate one sensor with another sensor. And I want to show you one other concept video from the Copenhagen interaction design project that we just did a couple weeks ago, which is to move the enchantment out of the, let's say, umbrella and move it into more of the infrastructure around us. Like this was a set of hooks that were smarter and knew what was on them. So sort of if this, then that hooks. So this friend is online because the system knows that that picture is being hung from that hook. And the system knows that those running shoes are being hung from that hook, and it's good weather for running outside, and that it's going to rain so that, you see what I mean? So that the location of the technology doesn't need to be in the umbrella or in the shoes, it can be on the sort of infrastructure around that's guiding them. So we've talked about lots of different scales of these things, sort of jewelry scale, toy scale, pill cap scale. I just want to talk about a bigger project, apartment scale enchantment. This is I just looked this up, the median price per square foot for a home in Manhattan is $1,300 per square foot, which means that for a $1,000 flat, it's $1.3 million, right? So that's like, what's a big price tag, even if you're working here, right? As a young person. So there's lots of examples that are inspiring of how do people choose to live in smaller, compact spaces, either campers or sailboats. They do this on vacation. People choose, people go. So we've been sort of decomposing all of what people do at home, like sleeping and working and dining and lounging in movie mode and yoga mode, and trying to build apartments that have transformer tech where a 1,000 square feet apartment can be sort of built in 25% of the square footage. So rather than it costing you 1.3 million, it only costs you 330K plus the money for tech, and that gives you a big budget for transformer tech. And so this is an apartment that we've prototyped over at the Media Lab that has thickened wall, thickened ceiling, and thickened floor that can hide either exercise equipment or tables or bed or other things that give you sort of this holodeck fantasy. You have to be sort of neat, though. Like you can't like have a lot of other stuff around the apartment because then it gets, hung up in the. So one other example from part 4 is this idea of embedding feedback systems in furniture, and this one was done for Salesforce, where Salesforce was interested in having more balanced conversations on Teams. Like a lot of people, a lot of introverts don't get as much airtime as extroverts, and so this is this started off as sort of this floral pie chart, if you will. I mean, it had this, each side of that grows more as that person talks. And so you get a sense over time. I mean, it's both something that's in the middle of the table, that's sort of like a floral, like a decorative arrangement, but also gives you feedback about who's contributing more or less. And where the project is now is rather than doing the centerpiece, we just made the whole table into a constellation of LEDs that are underneath a wood veneer. So as the person sitting on one side speaks more, very, very slowly over the course of 10 minutes, that sort of wedge of the table gradually illuminates. So you can see over 20 or 30 minutes, you get these different scenarios. You can't really see them here, of some wedges are more lit and other wedges are less lit. So that's mostly what I wanted to show. And let's see, I'm not going to show this, but I guess I would harken back. One of the first stories that I write in the book is about my grandfather, who had a wood shop with this huge diversity of tools. And when I was a kid, he would always say like, "Oh, hand me the chisel over there." And I'd be like, "The chisel over there, it's sort of the same as the chisel you're using." And he'd be like, "No, it's very different. It's very, it's like the blade is like slightly curved, and the one I'm using is straight." Okay, so just Kevin Kelly talks about this in What Technology Wants, which is a really, really good book. But he notes that if you look at the diversification and complexity of life on a coral reef, or of any mature tool set like chisels or shoes or silverware or drinking glasses, as these categories mature, you have huge diversification and specialization and redundancy, and that's what I would hope that we have in terms of our tools. That we don't have convergence into one thing, but we have this huge specialization and divergence. And that will make our interfaces more tangible, like the wallet, more haptic, more incidental, like the Facebook coffee table you saw in the first video. It's there, you can pay attention to it, you don't have to pay attention to it. It's embedded in natural things, and it's expressive and I think more humanistic. I'm happy to take questions. Thanks. Hi, Todd.
Hey, how's it going, Dave?
Good.
So many of the examples you gave, I love them. There's like a great design sense to them, right? There's a sense of restraint on the bottom, right? Just sort of do one thing really simply, and it's kind of intuitive what it does. It's natural. Should we be confident that sort of level of design will win out in this future, or are we going to get a lot of annoying things of trying to be too smart, right?
Yeah, I do think that the design challenge is to make a set of things that are doing very little for us, that are, and not count on one device to have all of the services that satisfy all of the questions we might have about whatever category it is. Yeah, and I think the service that our phones can play is for that, is for the drill down of the drill down of the drill down, but they shouldn't handle the other levels of questions that we might ask about most things. The more sort of high level.
So like the umbrella case, how do you keep that from the next company comes along and has it do 15 different things and is different
Well, I have control over all these companies, so luckily I can just tell them not to. I mean, I don't know how, I mean, obviously it's going to be messy and ugly and with lots of instructive failures and no, but it's really, I think it really will be ugly. Like the number of companies that get into providing services. I mean, if you think, I had a conversation yesterday about somebody about the luggage industry, and he was saying like, what should Samsonite do? You know, how should Samsonite differentiate their luggage? You know, they've tried to differentiate it with the form, the lightness of the case, the wheels, the colors. Like, what should they do? And I'm like, well, it's sort of a no-brainer that they should put a Bluetooth LE chip in the luggage so it can tell you when it's close to you, if you picked up the wrong one, when the luggage is coming. Like, wouldn't that be useful? Like, of course it would be useful. And so obviously, like, all luggage companies over the next decade are going to experiment with services that change the inert thing to a smarter service-based thing just because it's in their business interest to do it. But yeah, I'm sure lots of people will make lots of mistakes. That's why it's important to have good designers. Hi, Elizabeth.
I think one of the things that I just worry about and I think needs a lot more emphasis is the failure mode of things. Mm-hmm. And like 37 Signals put out a book years ago about error messages on computers. And I guess it's not a print, but the
like
same idea.
404 or 404.
Well, the same idea. I mean, not to say this is not particular to Google, but when I was coming here today, I had some questions, and the person who answered the phone would only give me an email address, which spits out a boilerplate, which points you to a form, but not in Chrome and not in IE would the form appear. There was a server error or a 404 error or whatever, so I couldn't get to the form. So I had to sort of go around to try to get to a person.
What's an example of how one of these things might fail elegantly?
Well, I was just elegantly, yeah. I mean, it just like if the pill bottle, for example, extending the pill bottle idea, if it wasn't going to let you take too many, and so one of its mechanisms was to lock itself if you've already taken the one for the day, but you actually drop that one down the sink and you need to have a way to tell it, don't do that.
No, yeah, I think, I mean, one of the reasons why I show the happy fork is that just seems to be only paternalistic and no positive feedback, right? Like that is only about slapping people's hands and not about doing the thing that we know from Pavlov and everybody else, which is what works, is to shower attention and positive feedback on things when they're going well, rather than just scold when the wrong thing happens. So so that's sort of a design approach.
Not being able to get into my refrigerator because it's giving some error wherever it needs an update.
Right, right. No, I do think designing for more positive behavior is better than trying to lock things that people shouldn't be doing. I mean, a lot of people asked us when we were designing this if we could do a locking mechanism for medications that are abused by babysitters and other sort of use cases, and we said no. Let's just try to get people to take a daily med. Like, let's solve that. That problem would be a big enough problem to solve that we don't have to solve the overuse problem at the same time. Yeah. So I think picking the problem carefully is a good design principle. Yeah.
One of the things I find interesting about this is, the tools that we use today are largely interchangeable. It doesn't matter, if I'm looking for a pen, it really doesn't matter what pen I pick up. I can use it. If on the other hand, I need to now have a pen which use the pen which is listening to the world and is also has what I've written for the last week or whatever stored on it. It sort of changes that dynamic a bit. And so have you guys seen something where people are no longer willing to sort of dispose of things? People no longer caring about the $5 umbrella because they now have their $50 umbrella that lights up.
I do. Well, I think your first question, which is I think really profound, is that I do think one of the trends is redundancy. And one of the problems with the narrative clip is that I only had one of them, and I put it in the wash like you would clothes, So of course I put it in the wash. But I think for the guys that are doing the sun sprites, like I would want at least 10 of them, and to have them just be built into jackets and backpacks, and so that if I want to take this backpack today and this bag tomorrow, I don't have to remember to put the sun sprite on it, but they can just all talk to each other and they can say, do you have him today or do I get him today? So that the sensors can sort of share data on our behalf, and we don't have to care for them, and they aren't precious. And I think that will happen, just like pins. Yeah. Yeah. Matt, you had a question, and then you had a question.
So you mentioned that the goal is to kind of get away from the feature-rich, deep experience of a smartphone into more of a thinly spread out experience. But the great thing about a smartphone is that it has all these apps that do different things, but I can open up an app and kind of instinctively know what to do with it, even if I've never used that type of app before. Mm-hmm. And it seems like one of the issues with this is there's a bunch of different companies making a bunch of different products with different experiences. And is there anyone trying to create a kind of home operating system that kind of brings all that together, so I'm not going to my smart mirror and doing something and then having to learn a completely new interface for my smart refrigerator?
Right. That's a great question. I mean, should there be, obviously the people that are doing operating systems are working on design standards for the people that make apps so that they're easier to learn and have consistency. I don't know of anybody who's thinking about sort of other conventions. I guess there's certain companies that are doing gesture recognition, and they're working on conventions for like what's a dismiss gesture and what's a click gesture and other click gesture. But it's a great point about sort of standardizing the expectations for the Internet of Things. Yeah. But I would question what you first said, which is you go into an app and you instinctively know what to do. Like you may know instinctively to know what to do because you're sort of digital native, but compare that to like knives. Like, the complexity, like when you pick up a knife, that's instinctively know what to do, as opposed to, into an app and you sort of extend, yeah. Oh, you had a question back there, and then.
I just had a question about self-awareness. You had mentioned, it seems like a big theme is sort of making the individual more self-aware, whether it be of what they're eating, which we agree is something that's very hard to do no matter how much you pay attention to it. But then something like the Salesforce example, it just seems like that just, to some degree, that should just be something that you should recognize, that you talk too much and you're not letting other people talk instead. And why do you need something to alert you to that? And what's your comment on sort of that idea of self-awareness and technology and that interface?
Well, I think there can be too much self-awareness. I mean, friends have recently said like the quantified life is not worth living, which I like. And I think you can have too much quantification. And I think you can also think about quantified self or more in terms of sprints and less in terms of forever. Like when I use the sleep coach, the Zeo, like I used it and got something out of it for about 20 days or 30 days, and then I was really happy to throw it away because I felt like I'd learned what I needed to learn and I didn't have to wear the headband anymore. So I do think that you don't have to think about, like, we're not all going to quantify ourselves in excruciating detail forevermore. But what was your second?
Oh, just the interaction of that, and how do we actually continue to engender innate instincts, like you said, what to do with a knife. If we're constantly quantifying it, how do we, at the same time, let people learn instinctively how to just shut up when it's time to shut up?
Yeah, I mean, my wife told me not to talk about our relationship. Let's see. But I would say that, with my mother, if I like wash the dishes before I'm asked, I get extra points. Right? I mean, like we should all be so lucky to live in a world where we can read each other's minds and do the perfect thing for our spouses and our parents, right? But the truth is, like most of the time, somebody has to say like, you, like rub the back, I'm not just going to know that she wants a back rub right then. I'm not going to know that she needs me to come to the mammogram. I'm not going to know. I'm not going to know all of her needs, and sometimes we need tools and feedback that help us with that. And I think with conversational balance, especially, that's one of those things that people predictively get wrong. You know, people, like you ask somebody who's like maybe he's an extrovert, and you ask him after the meeting, you say like, what percentage of the time do you think that you were talking in the room? And he, based on a count of seconds, like it was 82%, and he will say like 55, like maybe 62, like that's about that range, you know. And it's like doing dishes. It's like I do the dishes all the time in my house, but you know I probably do it like 40% of the time. So I do think we do need feedback for certain things. Yeah.
I might be misjudging the age of your son. Was he able to use the home screen of a tablet first or a dinner knife?
The home screen of a tablet. Well, dinner knives are just dangerous.
My 11 and 9-year-old maybe could have used a dinner knife first. My 5 and 2-year-old could definitely launch their favorite app on these non-intuitive slabs before they could figure out how to use a dinner knife to get their own dinner.
Right. Point taken. Good. Right. No, what did you think of the Google Earth table in the living room as sort of a gesture-based interface that's rich but doesn't have a keyboard, can't look at Facebook, you know, like can only do one thing at a time, but the one thing is like a much bigger screen than an iPad and not an app store.
And the Skype cabinet was the one I wanted. Young children, because the terrible thing about Skype is that it's only accessible in these devices that also do other things.
Right.
And the 2-year-old is constantly, oh, there's so many buttons here that are not talking to grandma.
Right.
And
me too, right? Like I can't write on a computer for first drafts because there are too many other things to do. Like I have to do it on paper just because I'm distractible. I'm like, oh, what's going on the internet now? You know, like what? So like I suffer from that too. So hi, Jonathan.
So David, speaking of Enchanted Objects, what is your assessment of Google Glass?
I think you came in right after I showed it, but well, I wrote in the book that I was disappointed by it. At first I was disappointed because it didn't have a reference to what I was looking at. And my expectation was that it would understand exactly what I'm looking at and, like an augmented reality application, sort of notice that part of the wall over there is free and then put the information like right there so that it would have a sense or know that I'm talking to you and put the name above your face, or you know, have a sense of what I'm seeing right now as a base and then superimpose information on that base, which it didn't do and still just floats a screen sort of up here. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought about this problem that once we're all wearing that and the better version of Google Glass does work, where it's more immersive, that there will be this almost sociological problem that you'll see different things than what I see, and it'll be hard. It'll intrude on our relationship because we will no longer have this consensual view of reality. That you'll decide to filter out certain things, and I'll decide to filter out other things, and then it'll be hard to talk because you won't be listening to my music, and I won't be listening to your music, and we won't see the same things.
Well, because I think the whole concept of Google Glass is it's not supposed to interfere with your reality. It's a screen that's left to the side that you can look up to, but it's not supposed to be in your interaction with it.
Yeah, I don't because of the intrusiveness of the size of the glasses and how much they do shield. I find that they are a little bit of a pariah right now. They need to be smaller.
So I think that actually gets back to this conversation of sort of metaphors, you know, we're talking skeuomorphism and all that, and the metaphors that people, and expectation, so what you'll attach to things, because, you know, like your example with the umbrella, it makes sense that the umbrella would say it's going to rain today, right? Like that association works. I think the problem that maybe you had with glass is because it's a glass's form factor, right? You sort of have these expectations based on that. Well, my guess which is that, you know, you think certain things because they're glasses, right? You expect it to augment your vision, where it sort of does, but sort of doesn't. It's kind of so I don't know. I was curious if you think at all in terms of sort of these where you pick, because these smarts. I mean, anything could tell you it's going to rain. The pen could tell you that it's going to rain today. Right. But it's more logical and natural to have that be associated with the umbrella, right? So, and maybe you get into that stuff.
Yeah, a slide I didn't show, but I think it's it's a little bit of a eye chart, was the approach to when I did a bunch of ambient furniture pieces at the Media Lab. The approach that I took was to take all of the things that we surround ourselves with and touch every day, and then all of the apps that I use every day, and try to sort of make marriages between them. And the way that I drew the line was to sort of interview them. And I, sort of like I put the couch on the psychological couch and said, cabinetry, what are you really about? Like, what are you? And it said, I store things. People just think I store things, but I'm really about so much more. I'm about discovery and surprise and revealing things to people. And, and the coffee table said, I'm not just a low table, but the fact that I'm low changes the conversation. It's more about communion and sharing and informality. So that becomes more of a place for photos rather than, a work surface, that sort of thing. I'm not saying this is just my thinking for one day about it, but you can make a much better chart. Yeah. Why don't you be the last question? Is that all right?
I think that there's a really fine line between very, very useful tools to creepy tools. Like the
useful versus what?
Creepy.
Creepy.
It's like it's intruding your life. And like, how do you know? If I talk to my friends and I get it all the time. Google knows everything. It's kind of freaky, And it's okay maybe for the active user for those tools. Like you're choosing to use this tool, so you kind of assume that you agree to its terms and services. Mm-hmm. But then I'm wondering it's even for other people in the life, the more there are the tools, you never know what is capturing. For example, you may what is it, alert pen? You never know who's recording.
Yes, right.
Voice.
Right.
For example, you never know who's recording your lecture aside from this person. Somebody may be voice recording everything, right? You never know. And there are so many instances, and I'm wondering, do you have any sense of where the line is between when it gets really useful that people are he's okay, and where it gets creepy that people kind of freak out.
No, I think almost all of these things cast enough data off that they're almost all creepy. Even the ones that wouldn't seem to be creepy, like the Nest thermostat, it's changing your heat. Who cares what you set your heat at, and who would care about the history of how warm you warm your house in the winter? But if you think about it, that's showing when you're home for forever, right? So I do think we need privacy policies about who can access the data, and also mostly we need forgiveness. Mostly we need an absolution button that says, forget everything. So all of these things need a button that where you can go to the Nest website or even on the device and say, lobotomize. I don't want you think you've learned something about me, and no, you haven't learned. I'm somebody that's using the apartment, and no, you know nothing about me. So I do think these things need sort of big reset buttons to solve that problem. And I'm actually surprised that more people aren't creeped out by Google reading your email over the last decade. That seems to cross much more of a line than a lot of these how many steps I've walked or that sort of thing. So I think there's actually a lot more potential for being afraid with mobile phones than there is for a lot of Internet of Things, but it's spawning a new conversation about that. Thank you so much for coming and for your attention. It's really fun.